I know everyone's time is busy. I have exactly 11 slides. And I'm from New York. I'm one of you guys, so I can talk fast, but I want to leave time for Q&A, and we may be able to finish early. Depends upon how much you'd like to know about this. But so I'm here to talk about the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact and a little bit about the FSMB. In case you don't know, the FSMB, as Jeet just mentioned, Federation of State Medical Boards, been around since 1912. We have offices in Texas, near Dallas, and in Washington, D.C. We have about 170 employees. Part of their roles are to do the USMLE, as Jeet mentioned. We also do a Federation's Credentials Verification Service. We have a data profile, physician data center, and we support our licensing boards. And so we're there to support our boards to protect the public as best we can, but also working in collaboration with physicians as necessary. I used to split my time between Texas and DC, but with the pandemic, I had to pick a location. So I'm currently speaking to you from our DC office, and I mostly spend my time on the East Coast. I live in Maryland. I'm still an active member of the New York chapter, however, still licensed in New York because I still have a home there as well. But just quickly, the vision and mission of the Federation, just so you know, the vision is to actually support our state board. So that's simple, helping them innovate to shape the future of medical regulation. Very lofty, the way a mission, or rather a vision statement, should be. On its mission side, remember, we don't tell the state board what to do. We guide them, we nudge them, we recommend things, we support them through education, assessment, data, research, advocacy, et cetera, and then specific services. So how this works is, some of you may be old enough to remember that there was a time where every state in the country had its own licensing exam. That is no longer the case today. You've heard of the USMLE. For osteopathic physicians, it's the COMLEX USA. That took many years to convince the state boards to give up their own exam because they had a hard time, frankly, maintaining the quality. But part of the FSMB's role was to nudge them to consider adopting the USMLE as a standard, and which they ultimately did. 1991 is when how long the USMLE has been around. I should also mention we have nothing to do with specialty boards. We have a good working relationship with the American Board of Medical Specialties and the AOA and their certifying bodies, but people often confuse when they hear boards, they think we're involved in specialty certification. We are not. So this is sort of an overview. I'm not going to read every line, but I'll read the first line, somewhere in the middle, and then the last bullet. But this all began, this Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, and I'll go into what it is in a moment, back in 2013. So 10 years ago, the FSMB, my organization, and I've been there since 2009, but in 2013, we brought essentially all of the state boards together in a special meeting. And we told them, we have a problem. We take too long to license doctors. Even for your very first license, it takes months. Some states do it a little bit better in weeks, but most of them take months. And then even if you get that one license to practice, if you want another license in another state, like an adjoining state, it takes another several months. This is not acceptable. The world is moving forward. Telemedicine is beginning. We have to do something. We have to be more nimble. Maybe the FSMB can help you, but what can we do? And so we had lots of options being discussed. But ultimately, in April of that same year, so that was pretty quick, just 3 or 4 months later, the Wisconsin delegation of the FSMB said, why don't we look at the possibility of developing an interstate compact to expedite medical licensure and facilitate multi-state practice? And that was passed by the House of Delegates. It wasn't unanimous. There were some people who weren't sure, but most people said, yes, let's explore it. Well, from that, we really didn't know it would take off. So we sort of set a limit and we said, if we can get at least 7 states to agree to this, then there's a likelihood that this will work. So 7 will be the critical point. And if we don't get 7, we're going to drop the whole project. Well, lo and behold, by May of 2015, 2 years later, we were able to get the 7th state in the nation to adopt it, and we were able to officially launch it. We created a commission, and fast forward to 2023, in January, just last month, we passed 55,000 state medical board licenses issued through this expedited pathway. So that's just the background of how this has happened. You may not have even heard about it, but it is coming to a state near you, literally. So if you're interested in sort of the background of how an interstate medical licensure compact works, or how an interstate compact works, it is not a new legal instrument. I'm not an attorney and I'm not playing one, but interstate compacts have been around since the nation was founded. The Tri-Borough Bridge Authority is a type of an interstate compact for 3 states. The MTA between New York and New Jersey is also a type of an interstate compact, in that case, only between 2 states. I'm not sure if Connecticut is involved, maybe. But this interstate compact obviously is specific to medical licensure. But if you're interested, we wrote an article about this back in April 23rd of 2015. You can look it up and learn the details about how this all started and what this all means. So essentially what we did was we got the nation's licensing boards, and it wasn't easy, to agree on what was the most important part of licensing a physician. We narrowed it down to 9 requirements. The people in the room said, if a doctor has these 9 requirements, they would be comfortable in issuing a license to practice medicine pretty much instantly. But these are critical. And we started off with a much bigger number than 9. And if you think about, a lot of the states have licensure application questions that have like 100 questions. But we got them down to 9 requirements. So here's some of them. Graduation from medical school that's accredited, whether internationally or in the US. That's easy, right? 99.99% of the nation's physicians and those applying from overseas have graduated from medical school. So that one's an easy one. Second bullet was passed successfully the USMLE or the COMLEX within 3 attempts of each of the steps or the levels of that examination, or any of its predecessor exams. What are the predecessor exams? Some of you may remember there was something called the NBME exam. There was something called the FLEX exam, which was the Federation's examination, and the NBOME had an exam as well. But now, why 3 attempts? Now you might say, do licensing boards give licenses to people who it took them 3 attempts to pass the licensing exam? Yeah, they do. In fact, at one time, there were no limits, and the record is 19 attempts to take the licensing exam. After that 19th attempt, that person still didn't pass, but that's the record. And at that point, I think whatever state it was or said, no, that's it, you're out. You're not demonstrating competency. But now the USMLE program has set a limit of 4 attempts, which all the state boards have agreed to. But for this, it's 3 attempts. So think of this interstate medical licensure compact and these 9 requirements as the requirements for, essentially, it's like a TSA pre-check. If you meet these 9 requirements, you can get a license as quickly as snapping a finger. And I'll go through how the process works. But if you're not eligible, because maybe you took 4 attempts to pass the USMLE, well, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to go through this expedited pathway, but you're more than welcome to apply to as many licenses as you like, the traditional way, 1 state or territory at a time. But if you meet these criteria, then you could be eligible, and it could be pretty fast if you want it. Now, most of you are going to be perfectly happy with just 1 license to practice medicine, so you do not have to do this. This is optional. But whether it's for telemedicine, which I know many doctors have liked during the pandemic, or you want to practice in multiple jurisdictions, maybe in adjoining states, or you want to practice in distant states, this might be something to consider. Now, third bullet is completion of residency or fellowship that's been approved. It says by ACGME or AOA, everything is now under ACGME, but even if you graduated from an AOA residency in the past and completed the residency or fellowship, that counts for bullet number 3. Now you might say, why did they put that in there? Again, think about it. From the perspective of the state licensing boards, they're about to give the right to practice medicine at a snap of a finger, essentially. They wanted to make sure that the criteria were strong. And they said, we don't want someone who just did 1 year of GME who we're going to give 30 licenses to. We want to make sure they've completed their training. Sounds fair enough. But then if you look at bullet 4, the question came up, well, if they've finished their residency or fellowship, Why not require that they also be specially certified to demonstrate that they've actually not only completed the time in training, but are specially certified? Now, of course, this raised some issues, and there was some pushback. I was one of the people who suggested maybe we can leave this one out, because I remember sort of the angst about MOC and maintenance of certification. But ultimately, what the state boards decided, because it's their compact, it's not mine, it's not the FSMB's, is they said, well, at the time of application, when you're applying for multiple licenses through this pathway, at the time of application, we would like you to demonstrate that you were specially certified, and are certified at the time of application. But once you get multiple licenses through this pathway, then we don't care. You don't have to maintain the license, the certification. You don't have to do MOC as it relates to these licenses. And in fact, people wondered if that's true. And so the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission actually issued a letter on its website explaining that, because people were doubtful. They said, no, you must be requiring certification forever. And they said, no, just at the time of application. One other aspect of this, if you're grandfathered into specialty certification, there may be still some doctors out there like that, that also counts for this fourth bullet. Number 5 is possessing a full and unrestricted license to practice medicine already in a member state. So this pathway, this TSA pre-check for licensure, is really not for brand new licensees who have just completed their training. You will have to get one traditional license the traditional way, but once you get that full and unrestricted license, you can then become eligible to check yourself against these 9 criteria and potentially be licensed in the entire nation, potentially. I think the last 4 speak for themselves. You can't have any criminal history, no disciplinary action by a licensing agency. And the fine print of that is not only in the US, but anywhere in the world. Never had a controlled substance license, DEA, or permits suspended or revoked by the US DEA. And lastly, that you are not under active investigation by a licensing agency or law enforcement authority. Now, that's sort of a scout's honor thing, because they don't know if you're not under active investigation, but if they find out that you were, that's bad, because then you potentially lied on the application, and that has other consequences. But these are essentially the 9 criteria that the state board said, all right, if a physician meets all these, we would be willing to give them a license to practice medicine. So how many states agreed to these 9 criteria? Well, here's where we are as of last month. 37 states, the states that are in dark blue, have passed this through their legislature, and their governor has signed it into law. And these states are now participants in the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. So what that means is, if a physician in Pennsylvania, and PA is in dark blue, wants to be licensed in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, Texas, let's say for telemedicine, or they just want to be licensed in Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, DC, West Virginia, Ohio, the states that are nearby, the process is very easy now. They would have to declare that Pennsylvania is their state of principal licensure. That's where they got their main license. Pennsylvania would be the state that would check you off against the 9 criteria. And if you met the 9 criteria, guess what? All you have to do is check off which of the participating states you'd like to get a license in, and they will issue you the license pretty much instantly. Now, not really instantly, because these are not electronic credentials, so it may take a week for it to get there, so 7 days, 10 days tops, but that's a big change from months to weeks to going to days. Now, look at the light blue states. Those are the states where legislation has been introduced. Now, your governor in New York, Kathy Hochul, likes the notion of an interstate compact, and she would like to support the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, and she supports it this year as she did last year. Now, the reason she supported last year was for the same reason she's supporting it now, but last year there were too many questions about how is this going to work, and people were, skeptical. How New Yorkers can be sometimes, questioning everything. So it didn't make the legislation last year, but this year, the governor is hoping that the medical community and others will agree to it, because in most states, this has been a no-brainer, because it allows not only people to get licensed in their jurisdictions faster, but it allows people in the states that have adopted this to deliver healthcare in other states pretty quickly for telemedicine or for adjoining states. So it's not about just making it easy. Let's say if New York adopts this, it doesn't just mean people can now get a license in New York faster. We're not criticizing how fast the process is in New York, but for those of you who are already licensed in New York State, if you wanted to go through this pathway, you could also get additional rights to practice medicine or telemedicine in multiple jurisdictions pretty quickly, if you wanted to. Remember, this is optional. And then the states in gray, they're just not ready. California is not ready. Florida is not ready. Some of this is a fear that this is, in fact, about maintenance of certification, and yet the Interstate Compact Commission said pretty clearly it is not about specialty certification or renewal, but in other cases, it's just anxiety about change. How will this work? Legitimate questions. We're happy to answer them. But I think over time you can see the trend line. In 5 years we've gotten 37 states plus DC and Guam. I think we'll get more and more states in the years ahead. A couple of other aspects, and then I'll finish up and happy to take any questions. In terms of an overview, this is voluntary. So you do not need to participate if you don't want to. This is an expedited pathway. All it does is it creates a parallel second pathway by which you can get a license to practice medicine in a faster way than you can otherwise. It does facilitate multi-state practice. Now, for those of you who like doing telemedicine, and some of you might have gotten that experience during the pandemic, it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want in any state, right? You still have to follow local laws, because who is issuing this license? Let's say you're in Pennsylvania and you want to get a license in Oklahoma. Who is issuing this license? Is it the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission? No, it's Oklahoma. Oklahoma is issuing you, through this process, a traditional, regular, full and unrestricted license to practice medicine, whether you want to do that in person or through telemedicine. But it's the state that's issuing the license, not the commission, not the FSMB. We don't issue licenses. So it's a license like any other license, except you're getting it a lot faster. It does increase access to healthcare for patients, because now potentially they have access to more doctors from more places in both underserved and rural areas, and allows them to easily connect with physicians through the use of telemedicine technologies, including specialists. When I was health commissioner on Long Island in Suffolk County, there are parts of Suffolk County you can't get a specialist very easily. And even the local specialists are just busy, whether it's typically in areas like oncology. So as I say, legislation has been formally introduced this year in Hawaii, Massachusetts, Missouri, New Mexico, New York, and Virginia, and we'll see where it goes. Is there a cost? Well, if you're going to get something a lot easier, there is a cost, usually. And in this case, there is a one-time administration and processing fee that the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission, which runs this compact, decided upon. It's currently $700 at the time of application, one-time fee. $300 of that goes to the state of principal licensure. And that's, by the way, the state where you're already licensed or the state where you work most of your time. And if that doesn't help because you're working in multiple states, it's the state where you file your income taxes. So that's your state of principal license. That state gets $300 to check you against the 9 criteria, more than likely. And then the $400 fee is paid to the commission for their operating funds to sort of maintain this interstate compact. Now, let's say New York adopts this. So before you run off and get 37 licenses because you can, there is a fee for each state's medical license, just like there is a fee for each state's medical license now, if you do it one at a time. So let's talk a little bit about licensure fees. Who gets the money when you pay your license fee? It does not go to the pockets, I can tell you for sure, of the board members who serve on the board, whether it's the staff or the physicians or the public members. It goes to support the ability of the state board to fulfill its mission. And what is the mission of the state medical board? First and foremost, it's to protect the public. But there's an ancillary goal of the state licensing board, and that is also to look out for the profession, which means if a patient or a patient's relative complains to a state licensing board and says, for example, I want my physician's license revoked or brought up on charges because they kept me waiting too long in the waiting room, for example. Do we get those phone calls? Believe it or not, we do. That's easy. Our staff at these state boards will say, well, I'm sorry, sir or ma'am, I'm sorry that happened. We would encourage you to talk to your doctor, but that's not grounds for removing his or her license. We're sorry that happened, but that's not the type of complaint that we look at. Now, on the other hand, if a patient calls a state licensing board, whether in New York or New Jersey or elsewhere, and says, I want to complain because my doctor is a bad doctor. I don't think he knows or she knows what they're doing. I think they're incompetent. I think they're a danger to the public. That obviously is a different category than a waiting room problem, but that's where due process comes in. And that's where we, the state boards, pay for investigators, lawyers, smart people who look at these cases. And sometimes the state boards get criticized, as you may know, for taking too long. But the reason we take long is we want to make sure that we thoughtfully look at the complaint, thoughtfully investigate, find out what happened. Is this a pattern? Is this a one-off? So those fees that you pay for your license pay for that sort of process, making sure that it's fair. Because if we don't have the funds to do that, you don't want us to be cutting corners, trust me, right? On these sorts of things, because your license is arguably the most important credential you will ever get as a physician, not to take anything away from your medical degree or your specialty certification or any honors that you've gotten, but your license is what you need for your livelihood, don't you? So that's where the fees come in. We don't tell the state boards how much to charge for their licensing fees normally. And likewise, we don't tell the state boards how much to charge for an additional license through this compact mechanism. So most state boards, because they're kind of new at this, have basically set the same fee. But the hope is over time, I've had lots of conversations with folks about this, over time, the hope is through economies of scale that those costs will go down, because not every state has to check you across those 9 criteria. Only one state does that at the very beginning, and they give you sort of an eligibility period for 12 months where you can apply to additional licenses. But every state does not have to check you across those credentials. That's the beauty of the Interstate Compact. So I mentioned the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission. What is that? So let's say New York were to adopt this through the Assembly and the Senate, and then the governor, let's say, signed off on it, and it becomes law. Well, New York State would be asked to designate 2 individuals from New York State who could serve as commissioners on this Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission. The commission includes all of the participating boards, so it's 37 plus DC plus Guam, so that's times 2, the number of commissioners there are. They elect officers, they appoint committees, so it is another bureaucracy. They first began their meetings formally in 2015. The commission can accept federal or private grants to fund their operations. And in fact, because once a state adopts this, there's a technical back end that has to be adopted, right? So the FSMB has worked with HRSA, the Human Resources and Health Resources and Services Administration at HHS, and gotten some funding from them to fund the state medical boards so that they can implement this interstate compact. And that has been very helpful to a number of state boards who otherwise might not have had budgeted for this, might not have the resources to do this. And in terms of numbers, again, the first license to practice medicine through this expedited pathway was only issued less than 6 years ago in April of 2017. And as of February the 1st of this year, 55,000 licenses have been issued through this expedited pathway. So it seems to be working and seems to be something that is supported by the public, by doctors, by health systems, by legislators, by policymakers. Honestly, the only people who are opposed are those who really don't fully understand maybe how this works, or are just fearful of what this could lead to. But as long as the state boards are involved, there shouldn't be an issue. Now, remember I said the state board is the one that issues these licenses. So that means the state still has full ability to take away that license. So if they get a complaint and they think it's legitimate, they can still do discipline, just like they do now. So one of the myths out there is that if a state joins this Interstate Compact Commission, they're giving up their rights to discipline doctors. Not true. All you're agreeing to is an additional expedited pathway. If you want to take away the license because the state board feels that the doctor didn't follow state law, the commission has nothing to do with that. That's up to the state. So it is kind of unique in that. I should mention, and I usually say this to physician audiences, because some physicians will say, well, why do we want to do this? Well, I don't know if you know, but the nurses have a compact. Physical therapists are working on a compact and are moving forward. Psychologists, occupational therapists, social workers, many other professions are pursuing a similar approach to allow them to be able to practice in multiple jurisdictions. Now, here's part of the problem or challenge in New York. The Interstate Medical Licensure Compact is being considered at the same time that the Interstate Compact for Nurses is being considered. Now, you might say, well, isn't that a good thing? It might, that way they look at both compacts and they can decide or not right away. But the problem is the two compacts are quite different. In the Interstate Compact for the nursing profession, I don't speak for them, but in their compact, if you meet their criteria, you automatically are allowed to practice nursing in all of their jurisdictions. And they also have about 37 or 38 jurisdictions. So in their system, they say it's very simple. Once you reach the eligibility, you get some sort of certificate that enables you to practice nursing in 37 states. Well, when we started the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact with the state boards, we told them about the nursing model, and they said, no, that's not for us. So for example, I remember Texas saying, if someone wants to practice medicine in Texas through this process called the compact, we'd like to know about it, and we'd like to be the one issuing the license. We can't have doctors practicing medicine all over the country and the state licensing boards not even knowing that they're actually doing that. So sometimes I say to doctors, compacts exist for many other professions. If it's good enough for them, is it not good enough for doctors? And so I think it would be helpful for doctors to think beyond the box, think about how it actually could be good for the medical profession at a time when, as you know, there's a nationwide shortage and there's not enough doctors, or the schools are doing what they can to increase their class sizes, but there are not enough residency programs, and that's something the ACP and others are continuing to battle about. One final slide, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'm doing pretty well on time. I thought I'd be able to do this in 30 minutes. So my next slide is the last slide. So before, I don't want you to read it yet. So one of the things that the compact decided to do, the states that were part of the compact, when it started was, remember I said they wanted the criteria to be not easy. They wanted the criteria to be strong. And they were a little nervous about potentially giving someone they don't know well the ability to practice medicine essentially in potentially 50 states. So one of the clauses they put in was that if you lose, let's say you get 20 licenses, and let's say you lose your license to practice medicine because it got revoked because of a disciplinary action in your state of principal licensure. If that were to happen, that's the state that first checked you against those 9 criteria. If that were to happen, then all other states where you've gotten expedited licenses through this pathway would automatically also take that same action. So if you lost your license in one state, you could potentially lose your license instantly in 20 other states, which at the time seemed like a sensible, reasonable approach from the state board's point of view, because they didn't want people, and revocation of a license doesn't happen lightly. There are nearly 1.1 million licensed physicians, MDs and DOs in the country, but less than half of 1% receive a disciplinary action, and even a smaller percentage of that is a total revocation, permanent revocation. But it does happen. I see it all the time. But if that happens, the state board said, we can't have them practicing medicine all over the country. We might not even be able to find them. So we should be able to revoke their licenses in other jurisdictions as well. Well, and then last year, we had the Dobbs decision. So now we're in a situation where to be blunt, if a physician now loses their license in one state, another state may not want to do the same action. In fact, they might want to give that doctor a medal, depending upon what the issue is. So on November the 8th, the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission got together and at their annual meeting, and they had a rulemaking hearing related to this particular piece. And if you look at the second bullet, they voted on and approved a substantive change that any disciplinary action by a disciplinating board shall be considered unprofessional conduct and may be a basis for discipline by other member boards, rather than stating that it is subject to discipline. So that may is an important qualifier. So now, under this compact, if you lose your license in one state, the other states don't have to automatically remove that license also. They may if they want to, but they don't have to. And that's sort of in recognition of the Dobbs v. Jackson decision. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions. Happy to answer them. So nice to see such familiar names, Dan Pomerantz and others. So back to you, Jitendra.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone, again. So I have, I think, one question on the chat. Maybe we can start. And then I have my one question. I can wait till the end.
Sure.
And so these questions come from Dr. Lana Vadanian, that my understanding is that the ease in having the single database of our documents with no need to submit paperwork to all different licensing boards. Can Dr. Chaudhry confirm that?
Yes. So how that was for, so literally, if you were interested in multiple licenses through this pathway, again, to rehash, the state of principal licensure that you identify would be the state that would check you against those 9 criteria. And, they would check on the medical school, make sure you did actually graduate from medical school, make sure you finish your residency, make sure you're specially certified, because remember, that's required at the time of application. They would make sure you don't have no criminal history. There would be a criminal background check, which is part of this process because, again, they wanted the criteria to be strong. But once you meet those 9 criteria, the state of principal licensure would issue you a 1-year certificate saying you are eligible for multiple licenses for whatever period. I think it's a year. So what that means is you basically check off which states you would like to get a license, and they have to issue you it instantly. They don't have to ask any questions. They've agreed to this compact, which means that if you meet the 9 criteria, they're required to issue you the license. Now, they may add requirements during renewal if there's something unique in that state, but at the time of initial licensure, they can't say all of a sudden, oh, we need you to fill out this supplementary application, or we need some additional documents. That's not how the compact works. If you meet the 9 criteria, boom, they are instantly required to issue you a license to practice medicine, which is why you can imagine we had hours and hours and days and weeks of conversations to decide on those 9 criteria.
Thank you. Next question is from Dr. Ed Stelick, or maybe comment, I'm not too sure. Ed, all yours.
Hi, Dr. Stelick.
First of all, I wanted to say hello and welcome. It's great to see you again, and we miss you as a regular member of our New York group.
I still pay my dues, by the way.
I'm glad to hear that. One practical question with respect to practicing telemedicine in other states and other potential opportunities. The issue is clear, but just to clarify, if you're treating your own patients who are out of state by telemedicine, my understanding is that you don't need license specifically for that. Could you just comment and clarify?
Sure. Yes, that actually has been a long-standing practice of state boards that doctors just didn't know. I didn't know about it. It's called de minimis care. When your own patient travels, it could be Florida or, for a vacation somewhere within the US. And can you call in a prescription? Can you manage them in California if they're there for a weekend? The states are okay with that because that's de minimis care of a patient already. I think what they are concerned about is if you start making a habit of doing that. And suddenly now you're doing this more often than not. And remember, this is all a complaint-based system. So the state boards don't know what they don't know. So at some point, if someone complains that, well, me and my entire family are being seen by Ed Stellick in New York and I'm in California and I have a concern, the California board will say, wait a second, how many patients is he seeing in California? Why doesn't he have a license? So de minimis care, that's a legal term, is permitted, but they intentionally don't define de minimis care for that reason. They want to leave it a little gray area. But if it's occasional, your patients, they're just on vacation, that's not a big deal. That's, they're more concerned about some of the other issues that we're dealing with, sexual misconduct, fraud and abuse, opioid misconduct. These are minimal in the scheme of things. And recently, the FSMB clarified some of this because, especially with telemedicine, Dr. Stellick, you're, as usual, on the ball with these issues. This came up. What about telemedicine? What if I'm seeing a patient where I am licensed, but I need to also follow them, or I need a consultant to weigh in? Is that permissible? And so, if you go to our FSMB's webpage, www.fsmb.org, you will find our guidance where we recommend to state boards that they be more flexible than they historically have been. And even in telemedicine, there was a time where most state boards, when I started back with the FSMB in 2009, would not allow you to initiate a physician-patient encounter through telemedicine if you had not first had an in-person encounter. Some of you may remember this. That has since been eased even before the pandemic. That was eased because technology was making advances, and state boards, they're practicing physicians and, patients as well. And they were impressed with, they were concerned about some of the abuses and the potential for abuse, but most states modified that and said, you no longer need to see a patient in person to initiate a telemedicine encounter. And as you know, the federal government has added some additional modifications this week as it relates to telemedicine and what they will reimburse for. So that's a very long-winded answer, Ed, but I hope that partly answers your question.
It certainly does. But of course, you can realize the importance living in Buffalo at any given time during February. About 85% of my patients are residing in another state.
Understood.
Thanks, Hank.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stellick. Next is Loretta. Do you have a comment or a question?
I do have a couple questions that came through the chat as a direct message to me.
Okay.
The first is a three-part question.
Okay. I'll get my pen out.
Yeah, I could read them one at a time.
All
no
right.
worries. But I think the first one you've pretty much covered in your slides. What is the cost, and do you have to pay for each state license? Isn't it expensive?
So someone might have come late to the conversation, or maybe was distracted during one of my slides. So yes, there is a cost associated with anything that makes your life easy, right? There's going to be a cost, but it's a one-time cost right now. I say right now because it may change in the future, of $700 to have basically you become eligible for this ability to practice medicine in most of the country. So in the scheme of things, $700 may not be a bad amount, one might say. I didn't set it. I would like it to be lower, but that's a one-time fee to be eligible for like a whole year against those 9 criteria. Now, in terms of each of the states, they don't get that $700. So the fact that they are going to give you the right to practice medicine, they have to, this is what they say, they have to be prepared in case there are complaints or issues to be able to follow up and promise you due process to make sure that the system is fair, not only to the person making the complaint, but also to the licensee. And so the licensing fee, there is a charge for each of the states that you want to get this privilege, this license to practice, and that's set by the states. I'm hoping over time, through economies of scale, as more physicians do this, that states will cut back on that because maybe they don't need to charge the full fee that they charge for people going through other pathways. So the biggest benefit of the compact is speed. So unless, now you might wonder, are there doctors who practice in all 50 states? Yes, we have such doctors. Such a situation does exist. It's not a huge number, but these are usually doctors practicing telemedicine, teleradiology, for example. So it does exist. But if you're going to do this, let's say New York passes this, just make sure you know what you're doing before you apply for 37 licenses, because there will be a check you'll be coming towards you, an invoice.
Okay.
But you could, in theory, do that. And by the way, we've spoken to the companies that sort of do locum tenens. They said this is a godsend because they're not worried about the cost. The thing that they really like is the speed, because it takes forever. And sometimes in that wait, employers will sometimes, move on. And so I think it's helpful. It's been found to be helpful by most people.
Okay. And the next question from that same individual says, and how about the malpractice insurance?
How about it? Most state boards don't require malpractice insurance, to be eligible to get your license. New York State doesn't require malpractice to be licensed. I know because I'm licensed in New York State. They've never asked me if I had malpractice insurance. But there may be some states that do as part of that practice. So remember, when a state joins the Interstate Compact, they are agreeing to issue you the license to practice medicine. If they have other requirements, I'm sure they'll remind you and let you know so that you can follow through. So for those states, I don't know how many there are, frankly, that require demonstrating that you have malpractice insurance. You will probably need to do that. And if you are getting a license, I assume it's because you're practicing medicine in that jurisdiction. And wouldn't you want that? I would think. So, but the compact is silent about that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, by the way, one other thing I didn't mention. So let's say you get 10 licenses, right? You're busy. You got a million things going on in your practice, and your nurses are helping as best you can, but you got a million things going on in your mind, right? How are you going to coordinate in your mind even the renewal process, right? Because some states renew every 2 years, some states every 3 years. Well, the compact, even though this was not part of the original mission, said, 55,000 physicians is that's a lot of licenses. And that's probably a lot of work for the doctors. Maybe as part of that $700 fee that you give for administration and processing, maybe we should help them. Maybe we should send out reminders so that, we can let you know when a particular state's renewal is coming up, and maybe we can even coordinate some of the CME so that if you did CME in New York that was acceptable to another state, maybe we can help you with that. So the Compact Commission has gone beyond its initial mandate to be helpful. And I think that's a good thing.
Great, thank you. And I think you did touch upon this, but the third part indicates, are there yearly fees to the Interstate?
No, it's a one-time fee, $700, essentially to be deemed eligible for, I think, about a year. So you have like a year to decide how many states you want to be truly licensed in, but that's a one-time fee. The licensing fees, just like traditional licensing fees, have a renewal process into them. Now, I think New York is a little unusual, right? It gives you a permanent license to practice medicine. I don't know if you all knew this, but the registration is what gets renewed. I don't think I understood this when I first got my license in New York, that it's actually considered a permanent license to practice medicine, but the registration is what's required to keep it valid. Something like that.
Thank you.
Lara, did you do you have any other question? You said you have 2 questions.
Yeah, I just scrolled down and I think that same individual made a comment. The cost is very high. It would be great if the fees were less, if the goal is to increase access. And then here comes the question. After joining, only eligible for 12 months. So I guess they're asking, but I think you also touched upon it. It's really based upon the renewal process, but I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, the eligibility period is not forever. So, because, time changes. And I think the Compact Commission said, if you're going to go through this process, we'll give you a year to decide which states you want to apply to, but we're not going to make you, forever eligible for multiple licenses. So I think that's what they were. I think they were probably trying to narrow the field of who's doing this to legitimate people who want to do this and not just for fun. So, by the way, do you have to do this? Do you have to go through this compact if New York adopts it? No. If you just want, let's say, one other license, you're licensed in New York, you want an additional license in New Jersey, and New York adopts this, do you have to go through this? No. Go directly to New Jersey. But if you're going to apply to multiple licenses and you need them fast, then this is something that you might want to have available in your back pocket.
Thank you.
I saw Dr. Green's hand before.
Yeah, Dr.
He dropped
Andrew
off.
Green. Yeah.
Is he still there? Andrew,
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to point out, I'm also from Buffalo, and as Ed says, there's a migration out of Buffalo in the winter, and a lot of individuals go to Florida. Florida,
get out of the airport.
Excuse me?
If you can get out of the airport. Yeah.
Right. Florida has a statute, which is if you're going to provide telehealth services to your patients in Florida, that you need to have, it's not a license, it's a registration that the state board of Florida, the state licensing agent of Florida issues. And all it requires is you fill out an application, you got to prove your licensing in the other state. You have to show that you have malpractice insurance in that other state, in New York. New York's major malpractice carrier is MACP, and I chatted with them, and they say that's fine. They will cover care that you render as telehealth to your existing patients in Florida. So you must maintain liability coverage. You have to have a website, a hyperlink to the. You have to set up what's called a registration with a agency of contact in the state, and it's just a titling agency. It's a fee of $50 or something like that. So for those doctors who are in New York or other states giving care to their patients in Florida, I would suggest they look into this. And it was a simple process, and I did it.
Thank you for sharing that. There are about 9 states, there might be more recently, that have a similar telemedicine license or registration, if that's the only thing you're going to be doing. So, I'm not here to push the compact. I'm here to make sure you know what it is so that you're informed if it comes up in terms of, hey, what do you think? Should you support this or not? Right now in the legislature, they're looking to you guys, the doctors, to tell them what they should do. Should we support this or not? Because they're not physicians and they have good questions, legitimate questions.
I have a question. So, like, if you wanted the license or the registration in Florida and you're practicing in New York, you don't necessarily need to get a license in Florida. You can just use this registration, right?
Well, that's what Dr. Green just said, but remember,
Yes.
Florida is not part of the compact and it's not under consideration. So even if New York signed this, you couldn't use the compact right now to get a license in Florida.
And what are the other 9 states that you're mentioning that had similar things that they may not need for us to go through the compact?
So if you were to get in touch with me, I can get you that list. I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't have a map for it, but they're mostly in the South. Tennessee, I know, is one, but there are some states where if you wanted to just practice telemedicine, nothing else, it's a little bit more affordable than a traditional license, but you can only do telemedicine. And by the way, now that the COVID emergency is finally sort of going away, this is the number one question I get from physicians is, I really liked using telemedicine during the pandemic. How do I continue doing it? Well, check with your state. Most states have eliminated the emergency or gotten rid of the emergency, but the compact may be one way, where you can continue to deliver care through telemedicine because you have a full license to practice medicine. In fact, that was one of the questions early on. Should this compact be for full licensure or maybe just a telemedicine license? But I believe wisely the state board said, no, let's do it for full practice rights. And if they want to do telemedicine, that's fine, but they can also practice in person as well.
We have a question from Dr. Raymond Pastore.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation and for your advocacy. So I was wondering if you could just enlighten us about the legislative process, at least as it relates to this compact. Namely, if all goes well, perhaps a year from now, New York might participate. And You mentioned that we should let our representatives know. How might we do that?
Wonderful. Great question. Thank you, Raymond. So the way it works in New York State, the New York State Board of Medicine does not have a say, believe it or not, in this compact. They report to the New York State Board of Regents that ultimately makes that decision. So this has been, as I said, the governor put it in her state of speech. So, I mean, that's unusual. I mean, that suggests a priority on the part of the governor, and somebody in the assembly, I don't have the name, introduced the bill as they did last year. So I think, and I've given, by the way, similar talks like this to MISNY and to the Board of Regents. So I think the problem is, and maybe it's not a problem, I want to be careful. The challenge, as I mentioned, is when this was presented by the staff to the Board of Regents, they sort of combined the two. And they said, all right, let's talk about the compacts, the medicine compact and the nursing compact. They're quite different. I mean, some of the slides had both of them up there. And at the end of it, there was like sort of a negative gestalt about it. And I was like, oh, I wish they had carved out the medicine, because the medicine, we believe, is thoughtfully put together, looks out for doctors, looks out for patients, and is thoughtful. Not that the nursing compact isn't thoughtful. The nursing compact is just too broad, in my view, compared to what the doctors were willing to go along with. So to answer your question, I don't know if the New York State chapter of ACP has a position, but if they don't, I'm happy to help them answer any questions so they can make an informed decision. But I think it's going to need advocacy on the part of individuals and state societies.
Yeah, the New York State, the New York ACP is leaning on the side of support. It's been discussed at our Health and Public Policy Committee meetings in the past, and with it being in the governor's budget, if the final budget contains this particular compact, then it will become law unless there is organizations and individuals that contact her with strong feelings against that particular legislation. So that's where we're sitting right now in New York.
Okay, thank you, Loretta.
Thank you, Loretta.
If I may, personally, I think a letter to whoever introduced the legislation indicating support, if that's where the chapter is headed, might not be a bad thing, because what you're suggesting is obviously another pathway, but proactive also, I've seen in other states, works well, because sometimes you don't know what happens in the later stages, but I leave that up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Noted. So we still have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Any other questions? The floor is all ours, I would say.
Sorry, I don't understand the email to send for that information about the telemedicine.
Sorry. I will type in my email now, hchaudhry@fsmb.org, and I will have my staff send you that list of the 9 states that have telemedicine licenses. The hope was at one point, by the way, that all 50 states would have telemedicine licenses like that, but it got stuck at 9, which was one of the reasons the Interstate Compact was, I think, favored.
Dr. Chaudhry, could I ask a question with regard to the states that have the compact? Was the language contained in each of their bills similar, or were there differences?
Great question, Loretta. They were exactly the same. That's how an interstate compact works, and that's how you can get 37 states, blue states, red states, purple states to all agree, is the language cannot be played with. So that's why those 9 criteria were very thoughtfully put together. And no, you can't take out a criteria or add another one unless you start a brand new compact, which no one wants to do. So we've come very far. So in some ways that makes it easy, but because, it's just an up or down straight vote. You don't need to tinker with the language too much. I mean, you can attach a different title to it, for example, or you can give it a number, but beyond that, you can't change the language.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Last call? No. So again, this webinar has been recorded and it will be available to our members after some editing. And if there are no other questions, Dr. Chaudhry, thank you once again. And it has been such a pleasure to have you back. And we hope that you'll be coming back again. And I know you're coming back in October.
I am. I
Our
look forward to seeing all of you at the
meeting,
chapter meeting. Yes,
Absolutely.
it'll be just like old times.
Yes. So
So
thank
stay
you
well,
again.
stay safe, and thank you for all you do for the residents of New York State and for the chapter and ACP.